How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Aleph, Daf 41 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, okay, first things first, I did not forget to put on a shirt. I need to demonstrate things with tzitzis today, and my tzitzis are my prop. It's a Friday, and therefore it's hard to me. I'm tight on time, but anyways, there are things on today's daf that are very difficult to like put into slides and stuff, and I think the best way is actually just like to show you with my actual tzitzis. So I have my tzitzis readily available on hand. Okay, now 3 sections to today's daf. If tzitzis is the responsibility of the person or the garment, there's going to be some interesting nafkaminas there. We'll see what the Mishnah Berurah has to say about it. Very interesting. Transferring strings from one garment to another. Can you take the tzitzis strings from one tzitzis to another tzitzis garment? And finally, we're going to get into all sorts of shiurim, all sorts of measurements and amounts and numbers. Not crazy numbers, but just important kind of rule of thumb numbers when it comes to tzitzis, like how many strings and how long do the strings have to be and things like that. Well, friends, without further ado, let's jump into Daf 41 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, we begin on Daf Mem Aleph Amid Aleph, about 10 or so lines in to the Daf. Oh, by the way, my plan is to get kind of halfway through the first Amud of Mem Beis Amud Aleph. Again, just because it's Friday and I have a lot to do, and I just want to make sure I get more in earlier, but also my tzitzis prop is going to be necessary at that point at the end as well. So I wanted to get kind of all the tzitzis prop stuff into this daf. Friends, Tana Rabbanan, about 10 lines into Mem Aleph Mem Aleph, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Talis Kfula, a doubled talis, Chayeves b'tzitzis is Chayev in tzitzis, Reb Shimon poter, whereas Reb Shimon says poter. This is a very difficult thing to describe. It's a very difficult thing to put into slides. I think that the best chance that we have at understanding it is literally for me to just show you on an actual tzitzis, which is why I have my tzitzis today as a prop. I hope that moving around my tzitzis is not going to interfere too much with the microphone. I hope that there's not too much clothing sounds in the microphone. Okay, so what's this talking about? So I have my tzitzis here. Okay, here we go. So tzitzis. So here's my tzitzis. I should probably block my face so that it changes the focus on the tzitzis. So here's my tzitzis. And, okay. So you could see, hopefully, that there's like four corners on it, right? There's like one corner, a second corner, right? Tzitzis. Now here's the thing. So let's say I were to wear this tzitzis not as a talis katan, right? This is a talis katan. This is a like personal tzitzis. What if this wasn't a talis katan? What if this was, let's use our imaginations for a second, a talis gadol? What if this was like a big talis, a prayer shawl that people wear at the synagogue? So how would I wear it? Rather than kind of the way that I wear a talis katan, which is, there's a hole here and I just slip my head in, I would wear it something like this. I would kind of take the talis and wear it like that, and I would take like two tzitzis strings, put one over my right shoulder, one over my left shoulder in front of me, and behind me, I would also have 2 tzitzis strings for the other 2 corners, right? One behind me on my right side, one behind me on my left side. So that's how I would that's how I would wear my talis. Basically, there are 4 corners in the talis. I'd have one corner over my right shoulder in front of me, one corner over my right shoulder behind me, one corner over my left shoulder in front of me, and one corner over my left shoulder behind me. Givaldig. So far, so good. I think that this is probably the best way to describe this. Now, what if this talis was ginormous? What if this talis was so ginormous that if I were to do right now what I'm doing with my talis, I would mamish have a trail behind me. Mamish, it was so big that what I really need to do in order to use it is I need to fold it in half. So now I take this tzitzis and I now fold it in half. So I'll get it the right way around. Okay. So now I fold it in half. And now it's folded in half. So now, interestingly, what's happened is I've created 2 new corners, right? I've created this corner that I'm holding in my right hand, and this corner that I'm holding in my left hand. By folding the tzitzis in half, I essentially have 6 corners right now on the garment. I have the 2 original ones that you could see, right? Both of these 2 threads and these 2 corners as well. But I also, by folding it in half, I created these 2 corners. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tzalis, and now with my new corners that from when I folded it over, I'm going to put those in front of me. So now what I have is one of my new corners, which I folded over, I'm putting over my right shoulder in front of me. And then behind me, I have basically 2 of the original corners behind me to my right. And over my left shoulder, I have one of these new corners that have no tzitzis on it over my right shoulder in front of me. And behind me to my left, behind my left shoulder behind me is kind of the original 2 corners. I basically have 6 corners, right? One over my right shoulder in front of me, one over my left shoulder in front of me, and then the 4 original corners behind me. So I have 6 corners. So the question is, what do you do? According to the Chachamim, you would actually tie tzitzis on the new corners. Okay? So these corners that are just folds of the garment are now corners that would require tzitzis. So you would put tzitzis on this corner that's in my right hand, put tzitzis on this corner that's in my left hand, and when I put it in front of me, I would have actually tzitzis on these corners. And what you would do is you would remove 2 of the tzitzis. You wouldn't have 6 tzitzis. You would remove 2 of the other ones. So you would have 2 of the original ones plus 2 on the folded over corners. Whereas Reb Shimon says, no. Reb Shimon says when you simply just fold over a garment, that's not going to be considered significant enough to be really considered like new corners that you would actually have to put tzitzis on. That is the machlokas between the Chachamim and Reb Shimon. And I think that was probably the best way to be able to explain this. I don't know how I would have really been able to explain this otherwise. I think demonstrating was the best. Okay, 1 second. This might interrupt the microphone. 1 second. Okay. And now I'm wearing tzitzis again. We're going to have to take them out a little bit later again. Let me drink a little water. Okay, now let's read it inside. So Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught. Talis kfula, so this talis that we folded over because it was so big, chayeves b'tzitzis, so according to the Chachamim, you need to put tzitzis on the folded, on those folds that I'm putting over my right and left front shoulders respectively. Reb Shimon Potter, Reb Shimon says, no, you don't put tzitzis on the folds. However, everyone agrees that if you were to have if you would have kind of tied it shut and made it like a little bit more permanent, well then, yeah, we would consider the new folds now to be actual folds, and you put tzitzis on those and take away 2 of the other ones. Tafra pshita, well, if you sewed it and made it permanent, obviously it would be then considered a proper corner and you would need tzitzis. Well, it's talking about not where you actually folded it, but more like used like maybe tacks or kind of not normal stitches, kind of broad stitches, bigger stitches. For my Purim costume, I'm thinking to use fabric glue. I don't know where I'm going to find it. Also, I don't know when I'm going to make my costume, but hopefully I'll be able to get it in, and hopefully it'll be good. Rabbi Bar Huna ikla levei Rabbi Bar Riv Nachman. Rabbi Bar Huna visited Rabbi Bar Riv Nachman. Very interesting. It sounds like, I assume Rabbi Bar Huna is Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. So Rav Huna and Rav Nachman were contemporaries in the next generation. It sounds like Rabbi Bar Rav Huna and Rabbi Bar Riv Nachman. Chazid Ahava Michsei Talis Kfula. And Rabbi Bar Huna noticed that Rabbi Bar Rav Nachman was wearing this kind of a talis, folded in half. And Rabbi Bar Rav Nachman did like the Chachamim said, which is he put tzitzis on the fold, and it was not sewn shut. If shita v'asa chuta, okay, and then he took off I think what happens is he took off the garment, or he wasn't folding it over his head anymore, or his shoulders. Become la de reisha, basically the tzitzis that were on the fold were now like at his head or something. Omele lav hainu Kanov Dichosav Rachmana Be'oraisa, to which Rabbi Bar Rav Huna basically noticed that Rava Bar Rav Nachman had the tzitzis in the middle of the garment, kilo on the fold, and Rabbi Bar Rav Huna said, this is not correct. You are not supposed to put tzitzis on a corner that is created by folding a garment in half. That is not the corner that the Torah was talking about. Also, Sajay. So Rava Bar Rav Nachman said, okay, fine. Thanks for the feedback. And he takes the talis that he was wearing, that Rabba sort of criticized him about. So he took the talis and he took it off and, put it in his closet or whatever, and put on a different talis that he had that conformed with sort of, I guess, was a standard talis that fit just right, and there was no criticism of the new one. Also Shajay, so fine. So also Shajay, ikase glima achrise, and he put on a different, sort of more normative, less testy talis. Amalei, to which Rabba Bar Rav Huna said, you're not done yet. It's not enough to simply take off the other one. Misavat chovas gavrahu, chovas talisu. Says Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, the chiyuv of tzitzis is not upon the person, it's upon the garment. Regardless of if you, Rabbi Bar Rav Nachman, are wearing the garment or not, a garment that has four corners must be properly tzitzist. It makes no difference whether you're wearing it or not. It must be properly tzitzist. It's not enough that you just took it off and put it in your closet. You need to fix it. Zil, Remila, go and fix the talis. Let us say that this supports Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, who says that the mitzvah of tzitzis is upon the garment, that the garment must have proper tzitzis. Chasidim Arishonim, as we learned yesterday, the early Chasidim, who was reasoned b'mitzvahs, Kevin she arguba shalosh, once they wove the minimum size of a garment, already are you matilin ba tcheles, they would immediately already put on tcheles, which means that clearly it's about the garment. As soon as they had the minimum size of the garment, they already wanted to put tzitzis on it. If it was about their responsibility to wear tzitzis, well then they would have waited until the garment was complete. But no, it's upon the obligation is on the garment to be tzitzis, and as soon as they possibly could, they threw some tzitzis on it. Shiny chasidim de machmere a nafshayu. To which you say you can't really bring a proof from chasidim. You could say that they weren't doing that because of the fact that the requirement of tzitzis is or is not on the garment. They were just doing it because they love doing mitzvahs, and they were machmer themselves to just get on the tzitzis at the earliest possible time. Okay, fine. Ufliga de malacha. However, this notion argues on the angel. De malacha ashkechel Rav Katina, because there was an angel who visited Rav Katina. De mikase stina, and Rav Katina was wearing a linen garment, and because he was wearing a linen garment, it was in the summer, he was wearing a linen garment, and he did not have tzitzis on it, as we talked about yesterday. We gave two reasons why you wouldn't put tzitzis on a linen garment. One was because we're worried about maybe it'll tear and you'll fix it, and then you'll leave the threads. It'll be tasif lomina. Also, we also talked about that it's what at night you might end up wearing kilayim. So he didn't have tzitzis on his linen garment. Comes the angel to Rav Katina Amarle, and he says to Rav Katina, Katina, Sadina, Bekaita, Vesarbla, Besitva, Tzitzis Mate Ole. And the angel says to Rav Katina, he says, Rav Katina, now it's the summer, it's hot out. So you say, okay, I'm going to wear a linen garment. And because I'm wearing a linen garment, I don't need to put tzitzis on it. And then, in the winter, what do you say? You put on this garment that doesn't have four corners. And again, this garment doesn't have four corners, it doesn't need tzitzis. What about the mitzvah of tzitzis? When are you ever going to do the mitzvah of tzitzis? You're always kind of wiggling your way and out of and avoiding the mitzvah of tzitzis, whether it's with the linen in the summer or with this winter garment that doesn't have four corners. So Amalei, so if Katina responds, An Shisu HaEsei, what are you going to punish me for not being Mekayim a mitzvah's essay? I understand if I violate mitzvah's los essay, but Okay, fine. So I'm not wearing a four-corner garment. Like, you're gonna punish me for that? So Amar lei. So the angel says, well, no, not directly, but bisman deika rischo anshinon. We don't punish directly for being mevatel mitzvahs essays, but it's kind of like a secondary thing. At a time of anger, the fact that you're mevatel mitzvahs essay will work against you. Now, so I understand if you say that the obligation of tzitzis is on the person, that's why the angel was giving Rav Katina Musar and saying, why are you not making sure to have tzitzis? But if you say that the requirement of tzitzis is on the garment, why is the angel getting upset at Rav Katina? If he has a garment that has four corners, okay, fine, he needs to put on tzitzis. But he doesn't currently have a garment with four corners, and there's no obligation for him. So be'etzem, the fact that the angel was coming to Rav Katina and saying, hey, why aren't you wearing tzitzis, means that tzitzis, the obligation of tzitzis is not simply on a four-cornered garment to have tzitzis, but also on a person to go out and get himself a pair of tzitzis. So elamai chovas gavru. So the Gemara says, wait, 1 second. So you're telling me that tzitzis is a chovas gavra? That it's upon the person, not the garment? Ki mikase talis devas chiyuva. Ki mikase talis delabas chiyuvahi. But 1 second. Even if you want to tell me that so you want to make the argument that tzitzis is not on the garment, it's on the person. Well, okay, look, if a person is wearing a garment that has four corners, okay, so he has to put on tzitzis. But if he's not wearing a garment that has four corners, he doesn't have to put on the four corners, right? So meaning, on the one hand, we're saying, sure, the mitzvah of tzitzis is not on the garment. It's not on the garment. It's on the person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he has to go out and get himself tzitzis and put them on. It means that if he's wearing a garment with four corners, then he better make sure to put on tzitzis, but not that he has to go out and get a garment that has four corners. So, okay, forget about the whole whether the tzitzis responsibility is on the garment or on the person, forget about that. Rather, what the angel was saying simply is, Tatzdake lemiftar nafshach mitzitzis. You're always trying to find an alibi. You're always trying to find a way out to avoid doing the mitzvah of tzitzis, and that doesn't look good. That isn't very good, that you're always trying to, in the summer I'll wear linen, in the winter I will wear a garment without corners, and always trying to avoid the mitzvah of tzitzis. That's no good. So the angel wasn't coming in and commenting on the machlekes about is tzitzis a chovas mona / a chovas talis or a chovas gavra. He wasn't weighing in on that. He was just saying, Rav Katina, why aren't you wearing tzitzis? That's all he was saying. Why are you always trying to find ways not to wear tzitzis? Taka, the Mishnah Brura says, the Shulchan Aruch, and the Mishnah Brura explaining the Shulchan Aruch says that Lemaisa we say that tzitzis is a responsibility on the person, but also not a responsibility on the person. And in both of those senses, we say it to be lenient. We say that mitzvah is a responsibility on the person to the extent that it is not a responsibility on the garment. Meaning, if I go out to the store and buy a four-cornered garment that doesn't have tzitzis on it, so there is no obligation that, oh no, that garment needs to have tzitzis on it. No. It's not on the garment, it's on the person. The garment itself, there's no need inherently on the garment to have the tzitzis is on it. And also at the same time, in that sense we say that the obligation is on the person, i.e. it's not on the garment, it's on the person. But we also say that it's not on the person, i.e. if a person doesn't have tzitzis, there's no obligation that go out to the tzitzis store and buy tzitzis right this second. No, the way it works is like the Gemara said, that if you're wearing tzitzis, so then as if you're wearing a four-cornered garment, so you have to put tzitzis on it. But if you're not wearing a four-cornered garment, you don't have to go out and buy yourself one. Amar Tuvi bar Kisna, Amar Shmuel, clay kufsa, vessels that are in a box. I.e., if you have a four-cornered garment in a box, Chayovin b'tzitzis, says Shmuel, you would have to put tzitzis on that garment. I.e., it sounds like kilu, it's a chova on the talis. Umod Shmuel, however, Shmuel admits bizakin shasal lichvoda, that if an older person gets for himself a talis so that he can be buried in it, sheptura, that you wouldn't need to put tzitzis on that talis. My time avida, because the pasuk says that you put a tzitzis on a garment asher tchasel, that you are going to cover yourself in it, and i.e. when you're going to cover yourself in it when you're still alive, which is not the case by the garment of which we speak, and therefore you don't have to put tzitzis on that garment. There's no inherent need for that garment to have tzitzis. However, at the time when they are needed for use, i.e. after this fellow passes away, so then Raminan lay, we do at that point put tzitzis on the garment, mishum loig lorosh cherep oseu, because we don't want to tease a despondent person, i.e. that's basically that, for example, when you're in a cemetery, you're supposed to put a person in a cemetery is supposed to put tuck in their tzitzis, because you don't want to tease the mason that we can do mitzvahs and they can't. And this taka came up in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, the Tosfos in Avodah Zarah, I think it came up about loig larash in the context of the cemetery. So over here, I think also there was an aspect that you would put on the maybe that Daka quoted this Gemara even, that I would have to look it up. But anyways, we're saying here that you would put on the tzitzis so that as to you wouldn't, I guess, want to go for your bechina at the Mesifta Derakia with a garment without tzitzis on it. So I guess at the time that he gets buried, you want him to actually be buried in a proper talis. But I think I didn't look this up it's in your day. I didn't look it up, but apparently I think I had read somewhere that we would I think people get buried in talises, right? So I think I read somewhere that they kind of make the tzitzis puzzle somehow. I don't know. Anybody in the Chevra Kadisha? Do we have any Chevra Kadisha people there? You want to write to us about the talis that people are buried in? Is it like a kosher talis that has tzitzis and everything? Kosher tzitzis, everything? How does that work? Anybody know? But I read somewhere that it's not totally like a kosher talis. I'd have to look up the halacha. So now we move on to a section of the daf about transferring strings from one garment to another. The truth is, that's kind of the next segments are going to kind of feed into that topic. They do bring up topics of their own, okay? But they all feed into the topic of transferring strings from one garment to another. It says the Gemara, Amar Rochbe, Amar Rav Yehuda, Talis Shenikra Chutz L'Shalosh, okay, a garment that tore outside of 3 etzbaos from the end. Well, okay, I got my prop. I'm wearing my prop over here. So, okay, great. So if this is, let's see, maybe I'll take it off again. Okay, so, if this is the corner, okay, this is the corner. So 3 finger breadths. The Mishnah Berurah says that 3 finger breadths would be the middle finger, ring finger, and pinky. So it'd be something like this. So 3 finger breadths from the corner. Here's the corner. 3 finger breadths would be something like that or something. Hopefully my tzitzis are within 3 finger breadths. Yeah, I think they're just within 3 finger breadths. Anyways, so if there is a tear, I guess anywhere over, I think I have to block my head so that the focus is right. So if there's a tear anywhere from here and out, then it's okay. You could just tear it up. But if there's a tear in this zone over here, which is within 3 finger breadths of the corner, so then you can't tear it up, as we learned about yesterday. Okay, fine. Should I? I'm going to put back on my tzitzit. I might have to keep on putting them on and taking them off. All right. Now they go back on. Oop, probably scratching the microphone. Okay. Great. So now that we had that demonstration, Amar Rachba says Rachba Amar Yehuda, Talis shenikra chutz l'shalosh. So if the tear was outside of the 3 finger breadths, yispor, sew it up, because it's not in a place where you can actually hang tie tzitzis, as we saw yesterday. I believe it was yesterday. If not yesterday, it was the day before. I think it was yesterday. Toch shalosh lo yispor, but within 3 finger breadths, don't sew it, as we learned about yesterday, because, and I assume it's talking about milichatchila, because then you'll have the extra threads and you might use it for your tzitzis strings. Will be tasav lomin also fine. Tanam Yochid, we also have a brayso supporting that talis shnikra chutz l'shalosh, that a talis that got torn outside beyond 3 finger breadths of the corner yispor, you could sew it toch shalosh, but within 3 finger breadths of the corner. Reb Meir Omer lo yispor. Reb Meir says don't tear it, and I think that it seems that the support is coming from there. Don't sew it up. But Chacham yispor, whereas the Chacham say that you can sew it up nonetheless. B'shavin shelo yavi afilu amal amam mimakom acher uvat cheles v'toleba. Don't, right, if you need to tie tzitzis on your corner or on your garment, do not do the following. Do not go to another pair of tzitzis and cut off like its corner and then patch it onto this garment as tzitzis. Don't do that, because the tzitzis needs to be made for this corner, not for the corner of some other garment. Vishavin, and they also agree, shemevi tcheles mimakom acher v'toleba. What you can do is you can undo, right? If I wanted to make tzitzis on another garment, I can undo these tzitzis strings and transfer them to a different garment and use my current tzitzis strings as tzitzis for a new garment. But they can't be broken at all. They have to still be whole. They have to still be complete in order to be transferred to another garment. Shmazmina matir mibeged lebeged. So let's infer from here that, are you allowed to transfer strings from one garment to another garment? It would appear that you can. Now, this is a machlokes that we're going to see shortly between Rab and Shmuel about, can you transfer strings from one garment to another or not? So it would sound like from here that this would be a support, an argument to say you can. To which the Gemara says, no, maybe you can't. Dilma de'i baloi. Maybe what we're saying is that if my current tzitzis got all worn out to the extent that they are not kosher for tzitzis anymore, so there's no need for these strings for this garment, because this garment isn't usable anymore. So in that case, maybe you can transfer strings from one garment to another garment. But just simply to transfer strings from one kosher garment to another one, we could argue is maybe not okay. I'm going to drink a little water. Moving on. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught talis shekula tcheles, a garment, a talis that is made entirely of tcheles. It's a blue garment. So now we normally say, so for example, this tzitzis that I'm wearing is white-ish. It's wool colored. It's wool colored, and you'll notice that the tzitzis are the same wool color as the wool garment itself. Hakonof min konof, that the we learn out, let's say, that of the 4 strings, 2 of them are min konof, are the same type as the garment itself, and then the other 2 would be tcheles. So when you have what if you have a garment that it itself is made of tcheles? So min konof would be more tcheles. I don't understand. There's something flying around. Oh, dang. It's actually something flying around. I think I made it not fly around anymore, hopefully. I wasn't sure if it was like some like little thing that floats around in the air or an actual flying around thing. I think it was a flying around thingy. All right, where are we? Okay, so Tana Rabbanan, Talis Shekula Tcheles. So when you have a garment that it itself is tcheles, which means that in addition to the tcheles, the 2 tcheles strings that go on all tzitzis, if we say akonof min konof, that you can add 2 more strings that are the same color as the garment itself, you're basically just going to be adding 2 more tcheles strings. So talis shekula tcheles, when you have a garment that it itself is made out of tcheles, kol minei tziv'onin pochim ba. So we don't want you to use 2 more tcheles strings. We want there to be some kind of a color contrast. So don't use 2 more tcheles strings that are the same color as the garment. Rather, use any other color. Kol minei tziv'onin pochim ba. You can use any other color. Chutz mikela ilon. Right? I believe yesterday we talked about the indigo. The exception being indigo. You can't use indigo because it's similar to tcheles. We want some kind of a color contrast. Use, what color should we use? Pink. Use pink. That would be elegant. Meisvei, we have a contradiction. Right? We just said that you're not allowed to use indigo. No way, no how. However, talis ein poter ba ela mina. That when it comes to a garment, the color of the tzitzis threads must be the same as the color of the garment itself. So as I demonstrated a few minutes ago, the tzitzis on my talis cotton are the same material, the same color as my talis cotton. Talis shekula tcheles. Now, if you have a talis, and just to clarify, if my talis cotton was made out of red threads, then I would use red threads. Now, what if the talis cotton was made out of tcheles, as we were just talking about? Maybe tcheles v'davar acher. So bring 2 tcheles strings, because tzitzis require a kind of psil tcheles, but also 2 other strings that aren't tcheles. V'tola ba, and that will be your tzitzis. Tcheles strings and some other color strings. V'kela ilan lo yavi. Don't bring indigo because it's too similar to tcheles. V'imhevi kosher. But if you did bring indigo, it's kosher. So on the one hand, in the previous brisa, we said that you're not allowed to use indigo at all. If you have a tcheles garment, you don't use indigo. You need some other color contrast. Yet over here we just said, don't use indigo, but if you did, it is nonetheless kasher. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Nachman bar Yitzchak lo kasha, kam betalis bas arba chutin, kam betalis bas shmone chutin. Shmas mina, matir mibege lebege dilma de'i avad. So comes Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, and he says, okay, I can explain to you the difference between the 2 brises, and that explanation is thus. When the first brisa says that using indigo threads is not allowed at all, that's talking about a garment with 4 tcheles threads. With 4 tzitzis threads. So a garment that has 4, right? So you have a tcheles garment, and it has a garment made entirely out of a blue garment, and you have 4 tzitzis strings on it. 2 of them are tcheles. In that case, if the other 2 tzitzis strings are indigo, that is no good. You need some kind of a color contrast. That would be possible. But if instead of 4 strings on the garment, you had 8 strings on the garment, we'll talk about Baal Tosef in a second, which is a very interesting question. But forget about that for a second. Let's put that aside for a second. If instead of having 4 strings on this tcheles garment, you had 8 strings, and the first 4 consisted of tcheles and pink strings, and then you had another 4 of indigo. So we say in that case, look, you already yotzei the mitzvah. So you yotzei the mitzvah. And in terms of the additional 4 strings, don't do it, because we're concerned that what if you sell the garment to somebody else and he says, oh wow, there's all these extra tcheles strings on it, and he'll go and use the indigo strings as tcheles in some other garment, and he'll use it together with linen, it'll have kalaim, it'll be a whole big mess, because they'll think that it's tcheles wool, but it isn't, it's actually indigo. So we say, look, don't do that. Meaning, right, because we're concerned that you're able to sell to somebody else, and then that person will say, wow, there's all these other strings, let me take these strings off of this garment, and I'll transfer them to another garment, and it'll be a problem because they're not actually tcheles, they're indigo. I.e., what do we see? We'll talk about this in a second, but built into this discussion is the fact that we seem to be assuming that you can take strings from one garment and put them on another garment, which is the whole concern here, that maybe you'll sell it to somebody, that person will see all the extra tchelis strings, they'll be like, oh, let me take these off of here and put it on a different garment. That seems to be okay. But anyway, so we say, don't have, right, even if you have 8 strings, don't have 4 strings that are indigo, out of this concern that maybe you'll sell it, then the person might undo the strings and put them on another garment. But in this case, since you already have 2 tcheles, 2 pink ones in my example, they could also be orange, they could be white, they could be whatever, but you have 2 tcheles strings, 2 other strings, and then 4 indigo strings, that case we say don't do it out of the concern for selling it, etc. But if you did, it would be kosher. So we see that you're allowed to transfer tcheles from, right, tzitzis strings from one garment to another, because that's the whole concern. You'll sell it to somebody else, they'll say, oh wow, there's all these extra tcheles, I'm going to make more tzitzis and I'll just transfer this tcheles to another garment. That seems to be okay. The only concern there was that, well, it won't be okay only because it's not actually tcheles, it's indigo. So apparently it's okay to transfer strings from one garment to another, unlike, as we're going to see in a moment, unlike Rav, who says that you're not allowed to transfer strings from one garment to another. To which the Gemara says, maybe de'i avad. No, maybe it's saying you're not allowed to transfer tcheles strings, you're not allowed to transfer tzitzis strings from one garment to another. But if he did, we're concerned that, okay, if this person has 8 tzitzis strings, 4 of them are indigo, maybe you'll sell it to somebody else. That person then might, even though he's not allowed to, might unravel the strings from the garment, put it on another garment, and it'll be a whole big mess. But it's not necessarily a stamp of approval for transferring strings from one garment to another garment. Chevra, the question of Baal Tosef is a fascinating question over here. Just going to drink a little water. Because we talk about, right, as if no big deal. Oh yeah, so in this case he had 4 strings on the garment, in that case he had 8 strings on the garment. No big deal. It's a little bit of a big deal. Are you allowed to just add strings? Can you add just 8 strings? What about 5 strings, 6 strings? The mitzvah, of course, we know is 4 strings. So Tosfos Taka wants to say, in that big Tosfos on Daf Lamed Ches that I told you I was going to get to, and I did, and now, because I did, we could bring it into the share. I told you weren't going to miss out. You were not going to miss out because I rushed through Daf Lamed Ches. You're not missing out. Maybe you are missing out the fact that I ran out of time today a little bit. There was a little more stuff I wanted to do. Hopefully I'll get to it. I'm always behind. Anyways, but Tosfos says, in that big Tosfos in Daf Lamed Ches that I learned yesterday, that, well, because there's a Gemara that we learned, friends, Masechta Sanhedrin, and Daf Pei Ches Amud Beis, where the assumption is that if you were to add extra strings, it would be Baal Tosef. So Tosfos is saying, I don't understand. How can we be talking about 4 strings, 8 strings, no big deal? Adding strings should be Baal Tosef. So Tosfos wants to say that actually it's no coincidence that we're talking about 4 and 8 as opposed to 4 and 5 or 6 or 7. As we learned the other day from Rava, the pasuk says Gedilim Taisalach. We learn out from Gedil is 2, but Gedilim plural is 2 times 2, which is 4. So that's how we get to 4 strings. And Tosfos suggests that maybe 8 strings is basically you have 4 for the tcheles, but also 4 for the white. That's how you get to 8. And I guess that you can kind of, either way would, I guess, be acceptable. Either you could do 4 or you could do 8. So that's what Tosfos says. I saw in the Mishnah Brura that the Gra Taka says that adding strings is no big deal. Add 100 strings if you want. If you add strings, though, from a different type, that would be a problem. So if you have a woolen garment and you have 10 strings, and then you add a string of hemp, which doesn't belong there, or cotton or whatever, that would be Baal Tosef. Adding a string, adding a non-acceptable string into the mix, that would make it Baal Tosef. But a very interesting question. I just want to make sure that we caught the fact that, hey, why are we adding strings to the tzitzis? And it gets into the question of Baal Tosef and how do we define Baal Tosef, which is obviously a much bigger sugya, a much bigger question, but I just kind of wanted to touch about that a little bit. Now, Idmar was stated, Rav Omar says, Rav, ein matir mibeged lebeged. So to kind of get, hit this sugya straight on, can you transfer strings from one garment to another? Rav says, no, you cannot. Ushmuel Omar, matir mibeged lebeged. Shmuel says, yes, you may. Rav Omar ein madlikin miner lener, u'Shmuel Omar madlikin miner lener. Rav Omar ein alocha Reb Shimon begreira, u'Shmuel Omar alocha Reb Shimon begreira. So we have three machloksin over here, where Rav is stringent and Shmuel is lenient. Number one is our sugya. Rav says you cannot transfer tzitzis strings from one garment to another. Shmuel says you can. Next sugya is Rav says that on Chanukah you cannot light from one candle, one ner Chanukah to another ner Chanukah. Shmuel says you can light from one ner Chanukah to another. Now that means directly. It does not mean that you can take your shamash and if your shamash goes out, just light it from one candle and then go to light another candle. We're talking about lighting directly from one to the other. And thirdly, Davar Shein Miskaven. Reb Shimon, of course, says Davar Shein Miskaven is mutter. That on Shabbos, if you're going to drag a chair, let's say, on the ground, then maybe it'll make a furrow. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. If it does, it wasn't your intention. But it's completely plausible that it won't make a furrow in the first, anyways. So that's what's called that a Davar Shein Miskaven. Even if it does make a furrow, it was not your intention, nor was it a psikration, nor was it inevitable, and therefore it's mutter. Davar Shein Miskaven on Shabbos is mutter according to Reb Shimon. So now again, Itmar Rav says Rav ein matir mi beged lebeged. We don't transfer a tzitzis string from one garment to another. Shmuel Omer matir, and Shmuel says we may. Matir mi beged lebeged. Rav Omer ein madlikin miner lener. Rav says on Chanukah we don't light from one candle to another. Ishmael Omar madlikin miner lener. Shmuel says you may light from one candle directly to another. The Ramah says that even lighting directly from one candle to another candle is also a little bit tricky because technically all you really need is one candle. So if you're going to light a second candle from the first candle, technically you're lighting a candle that is not obligated from a candle that is obligated. There is mal ayin sham, but okay. But Shmuel says you can light from one to the other. Rav Amar ein halacha Reb Shimon begreira. Rav says the halacha is not like Reb Shimon when it comes to Davar Shein Miskaven. U'Shmuel Amar halacha Reb Shimon begreira. Whereas Shmuel says the halacha is like Reb Shimon that Davar Shein Miskaven is mutter. Amar Abaye says Abaye kol mile demar. Who's mar in the context of Abaye? Rabba. That Rabba kol mile demar Ovid ki Rav would always paskin like Rav. Levar mehanit tlas to Ovid ki Shmuel. The three exceptions being that he paskin like Shmuel in these cases, right? Rav, it says Abaye reports that Rabbah would always paskin like Rav, but in these three cases he's taka paskin like Shmuel. Matir mi beged lebeged, that you can transfer tzitzis strings from one garment to another, umadlikim miner lener, and that we may light ner Chanukah from one candle to another. Vi halacha Reb Shimon begreira, that the halacha is like Reb Shimon by Davar Shein Miskaven, by dragging a chair or a bench. Tisanya, as we learned about Reb Shimon, says Reb Shimon, gorer adam mita, a person can drag a bed on Shabbos, kiseh v'safsel, a chair, a bench. Uvavat shelo yiskaven lasos charetz, as long as his intention is not to make a furrow in the ground. So long as that is not his intention, so if it happens, it's a Davar Shein Miskaven, and it is mutter. Rav Yehuda savar le Rav Yehuda Moser le katzra. Rav Yehuda would give his tzitzis to the launderer to launder, and he wasn't concerned that the threads might snap and the launderer will replace the tcheles threads with indigo threads. That's not a concern. Rav Chanina Avidla Sisa. Rav Chanina, what he would do is he would tie the tzitzis strings in some kind of a ball of sorts to kind of keep them together when he would send them to the laundry guy. Ravina chayet lehu meichat, and Ravina would actually like fold the garment over the tzitzis strings and like tie it shut, and then give the tzitzis to the launderer, and then afterwards he would kind of unsew. Did I say tie it shut? He would sew it shut, and then he would like unsew it when he got it back. All right, friends, and now we get into different shiurim, different amounts, numbers, and stuff, sizes for tzitzis. Tanar, one of the rabbis thought, kama chutin, who knows saying? How many chutim? How many threads? Beshami omrim daled. Beshami say 4. Besil omrim gimel. Besil say 3. Bechamate mishuleshes. And how basically long should the strings be? Let's say Beishamai omim dalet. Beishamai say 4 finger breadths. Beis Hillel omim 3. Beis Hillel say 3 finger breadths. The shaila is, what exactly does 4 mean? So it could mean that the patil, as after, right, not the gedil, but the patil needs to be 4 finger breadths. Rabbeinu Tam Taka says that it's the gedil is 4 finger breadths, and as we learned the other day, the gedil is 1/3 of the length, which means that the total length is 12 finger breadths. I believe that the Mishnah Berurah actually said that the patil, right? So 1 second. So Rabbeinu Tam says that the gedil is 4, which means that the patil is doubled at 8, and therefore for a total of 12 finger breadths. And I think the Mishnah Berurah says that, if I remember correctly, I think he was saying that the patil actually needs to be 12 finger breadths, which actually, if I use my tzitzis again as an example, I mean, finger breadths don't sound like that much, but it adds up. 1, 2, 3. I probably have like just about like 12 finger breadths of patil, I imagine. But anyways, okay, fine. So, the gimel v'chamate mishlezes b'shamay obim dal v'silo obim gimel v'gimel sheb'shamay shel b'silo omim. Now, when Beis Hillel is talking about 3 finger breadths, achas me'arba b'tefach shall call adam. It is each finger breadth is a quarter of a tefach. Rav Papa says, Rav Papa tefach d'oraisa dalet begudel. That a tefach d'oraisa is 4 gudels. A gudel is your thumb. So it's like it's the fattest part of your thumb, which is above your top knuckle. So 4 of those is a tefach. So basically 3 of those is the 3 finger breadths that Beis Hillel is talking about. Shis biktana, and if you are using your pinky, so it's 6 pinkies. Chamesh betilsa, it's a little bit confusing what this means. I think it means 5 of either your middle finger or your index finger. Rav Huna says, Rav Huna, dalet betoch dalet, mishulesh is dalet. Rav Huna says, we're talking about 4 strings within 4 finger breadths of the corner and hanging down 4 finger breadths. Rav Yudah Amar says, Rav Yudah, gimel besoch gimel, mishulesh is gimel. 3 strings within 3 finger breadths of the corner, hanging down 3 finger breadths. Rav Papa says, Rav Papa Hilchos that the halacha is dalet besoch shalosh, mishulesh is arba. The halacha is 4 strings. That's what we do, 4 strings. Besoch shalosh, within 3 finger breadths of the corner. Mishulesh is arba, and dangling down 4, which I think we ultimately said is really 12. I'm not going to do a demonstration with my tzitzis right now. We'll do a demonstration a little bit later. Lemember, is that to say the islu shiura? Is that to say that tzitzis have a shiur? We have a contradiction. Tzitzis ain't tzitzis ela yotze. Tzitzis means to come out a little bit, to like peek out. I didn't see this anywhere, but I'm thinking like meitzitz mina charakim, like peeking out from the cracks, just a little bit. The ain't tzitzis ela mashu, and tzitzis is only any amount. That the elders of Beis Shammai and the elders of Beis Hillel went up to the aliyah, the attic of Yochanan ben Beseira, and they said, tzitzis ein lo shir, that tzitzis have no amount. Okay, it's about lulav ein bo shir, and that lulav has no shir, has no amount. My love, ein lo shir klal. Does this not mean that it has no shir at all? Not 3 finger breadths, not 4 finger breadths, not 12 finger breadths. Lo, that's not what it means. Ein lo shir lemala. It means it has no maximum amount. You want to have longer strings? Have longer strings, gesund to 8. Aval yesh lo shir lemata. But there is a minimum shir, and those are the finger breadths that we've been talking about. Dilote malchin, I'll prove it to you. Because kayotze balulav, ein lo shir achinami, dein lo shir klal. Because how could you say that a lulav has no measurement, has no minimum amount at all? After all, we learn in the first Mishnah of the 3rd chapter of Masechta Sukkah, Perek Lulav Agozul, the famous Perek of Lulav Agozul, the first Mishnah of Perek Lulav Agozul says, Lulav sheyesh bo gimel tfachim k'dei l'na'anea bo kosher. That a lulav needs to have 3 tfachim, as well as 1 additional one to shake it around with. So it needs to have 4 tfachim of height, minimum. So clearly when we're talking about there's no shear for a lulav, we're not talking about a minimum shear, because there is a minimum shear of 4 tfachim. Ella, ein lo shear l'mayla, there's no maximum shear for a lulav. Aval yesh lo shear l'mata, there is a minimum shear. Achinami here as well, by the tzitzis, ein lo shear l'mayla, there's no maximum shear, there is a minimum shear. And once you need that minimum shear. In terms of when we talk about that it just needs to be any amount, that's if after the fact it broke, right? It got stubs like we've been talking about recently. So then there's no shear. Any amount could be okay. We learned all about the other day. We learned the Mishnah Berurah about that and what the halacha is there. To what extent can there be nothing left? Fine. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis thought tzitzis ain't tzitzis ela onof. Okay, tzitzis is the patil. V'chein u omer, and similarly it says vaykocheni b'tzitzis roshi. That Ezekiel says that there was a figure you saw in I believe a dream or if it was a dream, then it was a prophetic dream, that there was a figure that came and took him and grabbed him by the tzitzis roshi. He grabbed it by the tzitzises of his head and lifted him between heaven and earth. I hope that was not painful. I hope that pain, maybe when you're in a prophetic vision like that is not painful. Anyways, and that is talking about the threads, his hairs. And they need to be spread out like the hairdo, like an Aramean hairdo. An Aramean hairdo apparently is they would like braid some of their hair and then like have some of it not braided. That's what you want with tzitzis. Some of it braided, some of it knotted, some of it not. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis thought, hitil al akeren o al agadil, if you put the tzitzis directly on the corner or on, so either the sewing, so when it comes to tzitzis, there's like some extra sewing around the corners to like to reinforce it, and also by the hole. We'll talk about these holes in a second. Hopefully, I won't forget. But also around the holes, they're like a little bit reinforced so that they don't tear. Anyways, why was I saying this? That if you tie the tzitzis like either directly on the corner, I believe it's talking about like right here on the corner, or like anywhere on the reinforced sewing, or even I think there's an opinion that it's talking about these like tassels, right? I don't know, hopefully you could see it. If I block my face, maybe it'll show it, that there's like tassels at the bottom. Also on talises, they have these tassels. So if you tie the strings on those tassels, so Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov posel b'shtein. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says no, both by the corner and by the tassels or reinforced stitching. It is possible you need to have it 3 finger, kind of more removed. Kamanaza the Omer of Gidol Omer Rav, like who does this following statement of Gidol Omer Rav go like tzitzis tzricha shtei no tefes ala keren, that tzitzis need to bang against the corner. Shenema, as the pasuk says, al kanfe b'gdeim, on the corners of the garment. Kaman Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. It's like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Maybe let's just go weiter. I want to read till the end right now, and then we'll go back and review on all of these things. I have to remember what they are, but we'll review these things. Rabbi Yaakov says, Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yochanan, v'tzarich sheyarchik melo kesher gudel. That also you need to distance these strings from the corner, the amount from the top knuckle of your thumb to the top of your thumb. That's how distant. You have to have that kind of a margin, right? You don't want to have, as we just said, that you don't want to have the tzitzis right up against the side of the corner. You want to have it a short distance away, and that distance is at least the amount from your top knuckle of your thumb to the top of your thumb. We need a Rav Papa to tell us no more than 3 finger breadths away, and Rabbi Yaakov to tell us no less than that fingernail kind of amount. If we only had Rav Papa, Hava Amina, I would say Toch Gimel, it needs to be within 3, and it can't be any further than 3. Make sure that it's no further than 3. So I might think, well, let's then get it as close to the corner as we can. As close to the corner as we can get is better. Itzrich to Rabbi Yaakov, therefore we need a Rabbi Yaakov to say, no, it can't be all the way up against the corner. You have to have a finger breadth, kind of a fingernail of separation. If I only had Rabbi Yaakov saying you needed to be a fingernail away. Hava amina milo kesher gudel tloli kariv tfei. I might think, okay, it can't be too close. It has to be at least a fingernail away. Let me get it really far. I can't have it too close. Let me make it a healthy dose of far away. So the kariv tfei. So v'chama derachik. Male, maybe the further, the better. Tzricha, therefore, when you are papa to say, well, not too far, it has to be within 3 finger breadths. Ravina of Rav Sama, Abu Yasve Kame to Rav Ashi. Ravina of Rav Sama and Rav Sama were sitting before Rav Ashi. Chazi Rav Sama lekarne de glime de Ravina de saucer uvatsumi melekesher gudel. And Rav Sama noticed that Ravina, the hole where his tzitzis came through, the hole got kind of torn a little bit, and it was now within the fingernail amount of the side, i.e. too close to the side. So if someone says to Ravina, Lo Savila Mar, Lo Rabbi Yaakov, don't you hold like Rabbi Yaakov that it has to be at least a fingernail's worth away? Amalei B'shas Asiya Itmar. That's only at the time that the garment is being made. But after the fact, it's okay. Ichzif. And then Rav Sama got kind of embarrassed because he got bested by Ravina. Omar le Ravashi. So Ravashi says to Rav Sama, Lo taskif loch. Don't take it. Don't be too hard on yourself. Chad minayu kitrei minon. Ravina, apparently I didn't know this. Ravina is from Eretz Yisrael, which is a little surprising to me because Ravina, unless there was another Ravina. No, this is Ravina and Ravashi. Yeah, because Ravina was at the end of the Amoraim. I would have imagined by the end of the Amoraim, they were already in Babble by then. Because, I don't know, I feel like, who's an Amora from Eretz Yisrael that's later than like Reb Zera? And Reb Zera was earlier, Reb Zera was like Rabba's generation. And then Ravashi was like probably like 2 generations later. A little surprised that Ravina would have been from Eretz Yisrael. Maybe when he was like really young, he moved from Eretz Yisrael to Babble. I don't know. But it says Ravashi to Rav Sama, don't take it personally. Ravina's from Eretz Yisrael. 1 Yid from Eretz Yisrael is like 2 Yidden from Babel. He's out of our league. Don't be too hard on yourself. Friends, okay, we just talked about a lot of stuff. So let's go over it now. What did we say? So we said, number 1, that I'm going to get my little prop in order. Okay. So we had said, okay, the corner of the garment. So, right, you don't want to put the tzitzis all the way up against the corner. You want to have a bit of a buffer. That buffer needs to be at least kind of from the top knuckle of your thumb to the top of your thumb. That's the amount, I don't know, maybe it's like half an inch or something, I don't know. That's the amount of margin you want to have, minimum amount of margin between the corner and where the tzitzis start. You also want to make sure that the tzitzis is not more than 3 finger breadths away from the side. What else do we say? We had said something very interesting, friends. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So we had said that you want to make sure that the tzitzis are, it says, al kanfei b'gdeichem. Al kanfei b'gdeichem. I don't know. I say Shema all the time and I don't is it al kanfei b'gdeichem, right? I don't know. Anyways, vasula em tzitzis, yeah, vasula em tzitzis al kanfei b'gdeichem. Okay. So interestingly, okay, so a few interesting things here. First of all, hopefully you can see it. On my tzitzis over here, I have 2 holes over here in my tzitzis. I have 2 holes over here. So because I have 2 holes, basically the tzitzis are threaded through the back and they go to the front. And I have 2 holes and they just kind of like fall down like that. So the Mishnah Berurah talks about it, that the Beis Yosef says not to do it. Don't have 2 holes like this. However, the Mishnah Berurah quotes from the Arizal that he says, so first of all, so the Mishnah Berurah says that that's only for a talus gadol. For a talus gadol, don't have 2 holes like this. Talus gadol, you'd only have 1 hole here, and we'll talk about that in a second. But by talus cotton, and this is a talus cotton, you can have 2 holes like this. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Arizal, that the Arizal by a talus cotton would have these 2 holes. And he says that the minig in Poland is to have the 2 holes, and the minig in Hungary and in Ashkenaz, which is probably like Western Europe, Germany and stuff, would be to have 1 hole, which is a very interesting thing about the 2 holes versus 1 hole, specifically for talus kohen. Now, what else I want to say? So my talis cotton has 2 holes here. So what I'm about to say isn't so relevant. But for talises that have 1 hole over here, so what happens is, I had another pair of tzitzis that I had a different pair of tzitzis I was planning to demonstrate with, and then I realized like, why don't you just use the tzitzis that I'm wearing? But anyways, if you have only 1 hole here, so basically you're going to be, the knot is going to be around the side of the garment like this. It's going to be, if there's only 1 hole, so you knot it around the side of the garment. And what we're saying, so the thing about knocking against the corner means, if you have 1 hole, you could take a look at your either talis cotton or talis gadol. If you have 1 hole, so then it's tied against this, around the side of the, it comes in through the side of the garment. You tie a knot and you tie it against the side of the garment. Make sure that knot is on the side of the garment rather than on the bottom of the garment. If it's on the side of the garment, then it can knock against the corner. If it's on the bottom of the garment facing down, then it won't be knocking against the corner, which might be an argument to say that you should have only 1 hole, because that way you could have this, do what the Gemara says, it should be knocking against the corner. But anyways, but yeah, with 2 holes, it just kind of like goes down. But maybe but maybe you could say it knocks against the corner like this, because it's like free. Honestly, maybe that's sufficient. But anyway, so you're going to want to have that, it's a real thing. The Mishnah Berurah, the Shulchan Aruch, the Gemara talks about that you're going to want to have your tzitzis on the side like this, so that they can knock against the corner and not straight down. One thing that the Mishnah Berurah says is, do not have it like this against, right, at the corner. You don't want it at the corner, because that's what the Karaites do. The Mishnah Berurah says. I think it was the Mishnah Berurah, not the Shulchan Aruch. One of them says that's what the Karaites do, is that they dafka put it in the corner, because it should be in the corner. Don't do that, right? Either straight down, but really you should have it on the side so that it can knock against the bottom. What else did I want to say? We talked about a lot of stuff just now, about having the margin. It should be at least the fingernails amount, not more than 3 finger breadths. We talked about the 2 holes versus 1 hole. Also, in the 2 holes and on the sides, you can kind of reinforce it with extra string, even though, right, it says, al kanfe v'gdeim, that the string should really be directly on the corner, and there shouldn't be any intermediary, but you can reinforce it. That is fine. And bigadol, I think that was all the things that I wanted to talk about, friends. That was Daf Mem Aleph of Masechta Menachos, another fascinating daf about tzitzis. On Daf Mem Aleph of Masechta Menachos, we talked about if tzitzis is the responsibility of the person or the responsibility of the garment. We saw ultimately what the Gemara seems to be saying, what the Mishnah Berurah says, which is that we say that it is the responsibility of the person and it isn't responsibility of the person, in both senses, to be lenient. Meaning, if the question is the tzitzis the responsibility of the garment, that if you have a garment with 4 corners, do you have to put tzitzis on that garment? Not necessarily. It's not an obligation of the garment, it's an obligation of the person. At the same time, if a person doesn't have tzitzis, is he obligated to go and buy tzitzis? No, it's not like a lulav that's there. Right? A lulav is the obligation of the person. You must go buy a lulav. It's not like that with tzitzis. It's not that you must go and buy lulav. Although we did see an interesting story with an angel and Rav Katina, where the angel gave Rav Katina shtickle musar, and he said, you're always wiggling your way out of tzitzis. It's not necessarily a great thing to do. We discussed transferring strings from one garment to another. Rav says no. Shmuel says yes, you can. We had said that if you do transfer strings from one garment to another, they should be whole. Along the way in that sugya, we had also discussed, what if you have a garment that is entirely made of tcheles, and therefore you can have 2 tcheles strings. Therefore, the other 2 strings should just be any other color other than tcheles. Do not use indigo, because it's too kind of close. Along the way, we actually then also talked a little bit, we touched on the question about Bal Tosef, can you add strings to the tzitzis? Tosfos says that you can only add either you can have 4 strings, you can have 8 strings, you can't have any other amount. It would be Bal Tosef. The Gra says that even adding more strings is taka not Bal Tosef, unless you add strings that of something that would be not acceptable for the tzitzis strings. And we discussed Shiurim for tzitzis. We discussed that there are 4 strings that they should be within 3 hand breadths, 3 finger breadths of the corner, and that they should be dangling 4 hand breadths, which the Mishnah Berurah says really it should be 12 hand breadths, which we said based on Rabbeinu Tam, who says that the 4 hand breadths is really just for the gedil. Anyways, if the amounts shrink, it's okay. I forgot to mention that when I was going over, right. So right, that story with Rav Sama and Ravina, basically we had said that, at the time that you make the garment, everything has to be A-okay. All the shiurim have to be right. But if afterwards the hole tears a little bit and now it's within a fingernail of the side, if that margin that needs to be, so it's okay. If after the fact it tears, it's still acceptable. The gedil needs to hit against the corner. So if you have like one hole for your tzitzis, make sure that the tzitzis is going off the side of it so that it hits against the corner. And I think that those are basically the big things. Friends, I hope you enjoyed Daf Mem Aleph of Masechta Menachos. Have a great day. Cheers.